is just fiction, then why does Jesus Christ himself refer back to it as a real life event when he talks about how God made them male and female? He's not referring to it as allegory. And in the genealogies, we see how it traces back real person by real person by real person to Adam as a real person.
This was in response to one of my videos where I say that the Genesis creation story is a myth, and this made her very upset. But let's talk about why Genesis has some problems before we get to what she says later about Jesus. The first thing you have is that Genesis contradicts itself within the first two chapters. In Genesis 1, verse 26, man is created last after the rest of the world has been established. And in Genesis 2, it says that man was created first before anything else was established. So it contradicts itself right in the beginning. Now, why is that? The Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, are traditionally credited to Moses' authorship, which seems unlikely considering they both predate and post-date his entire life. The origin story in Genesis is supposed to have happened at 4500 or 5000 BCE. Moses lived between 1390 and 1271 BCE, and Deuteronomy documents his death, and the Pentateuch also refers to Moses often in the third person. So this is likely a collection that was put together by several authors. We also know that Genesis was made up of 3 manuscripts that have very different timelines. The first is called the J manuscript because it refers to God as Yahweh, was in the 10th century. We now have the E script, which is where we get Elohim, that comes from the 9th century BCE. Those two were combined in the 7th century BCE. And then we have the newest, which is the P script, which was the finalized script, which happened in 550 BCE, which was put together by a priest who combined all these manuscripts and added to them. He wrote his own version into these. He is the one who wrote Genesis 1. And what's fascinating about the P manuscript that was written, compiled in 550 BCE, this is where we get the final form of Genesis, that happens right in the middle of the Babylonian exilic period, which was from 587 BCE to 538 BCE. And the creation story that came from the Babylonian exilic period mirrors almost identically the Babylonian creation story that was called Enuma Elish. And lastly, we know that the creation story is likely myth because it's a poem. Genesis is made up of several different types of literature. It does have historical references to real people. It has genealogies, none of which we can confirm. And often, new rulers would create a genealogy to make it seem like they were important and deserved the throne. That lasted all the way until the Middle and the Dark Ages. But within the span of Genesis, the first 2 chapters are poems. They're not historical dialogue or novellas like the rest of the text. Now let's watch the rest of your video.
And I know that you take scripture seriously because you weaponize it against conservatives, telling them that they're not doing what Jesus commanded of us. But do we only take what Jesus said as fact if it supports our agenda?
And yes, Jesus references Genesis because the people that he was teaching would have understood this to be their origin story. This was their creation story. This was their scripture. That makes sense. He also spoke in parables very often. And so him referencing the poetry that opens Genesis is absolutely on form for Jesus' teaching. And it's interesting you mentioned twisting the words of Christ because I know you're very good at it because your movement has managed to take love thy neighbor, help the marginalized, give to the least of these, be kind to the foreigner, welcome the stranger, help the sick and the weak. And you have managed to take that and you have managed to go violate the human rights of immigrants who are just trying to have a better life. You've managed to vote away programs that help the poor, that give resources to the poor and move that money upward to the rich. You've also managed to somehow take the Bible and act like it is a central theme of Christianity to be anti-LGBTQ when Jesus never mentioned that, but he did mention adultery, and you're out here supporting a serial adulterer with no qualms given. When you read the scripture and you study history with the intent of learning something instead of proving your point, you find the truth. I would try it sometime.